I was born with the curiosity to explore the realms of darkness, to seek out the elusive shadows and question their existence, their never-ending convolution with the light. All things were born from this darkness. Question everything. Find your own truth, engage all mysteries, open your mind, and join me on my journey through the darkness. Aunt Jenny Johnson in the haunted Bankhead National Forest, Lawrence County, Alabama. Deep within the hills and woodlands of Lawrence County, Alabama, lies the Bankhead National Forest. During the end of the Civil War, the Confederacy enacted both a tax and a draft law which made it mandatory to draft men into their army and to take supplies, animals, and food from local farmers. Many people in Alabama saw this as a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. They wanted nothing to do with it and tried to maintain a neutral standing. But the Confederacy enlisted the Home Guard as a means to deal with those who oppose. Jenny Johnson Brooks, a half-Cherokee woman, along with her husband Willis Brooks, raised their 8 children and ran an inn and tavern on Byler Road. Deserters of the war often ran to the Brooks family for help, and they in turn would hide families deep in the hills and forests. In 1863, the Home Guard came to the inn and took Willis Brooks by gunpoint. There, witnessed by his whole family, the Home Guard beat and tortured Willis and hanged him from the tree in the front yard. The oldest son, 17-year-old John Brooks, ran to save his father and was shot dead by the Confederate gunmen. The family watched in horror, unable to save them. Willis, still alive and hanging, watched as his son was murdered. The Home Guard shot Willis in the chest and rode off into the hills. The remaining Brooks family pulled Willis out of the tree and huddled around their deceased kin. Fueled by rage and revenge, Jenny grabbed her boys by the arm and put their hands into the warm blood of their father and brother and made them swear to never rest until the 8 Confederates responsible for killing their family were dead. Along with the blood oath, Jenny taught her boys how to shoot. That same year, Jenny and her second son Mac killed the leader of the Home Guard, cut off his head, put it in a burlap sack, and carried it home. There, she boiled and cleaned the skull and turned it into a soap dish that she used for the rest of her life. Soon after, the war ended, but the battle of the Brooks family and the remaining Home Guard continued to rage on. As the years progressed, Jenny made a notch in her walking stick for every Home Guardsman they killed. The blood oath lasted 40 years and eventually took the lives of all her boys. Out of the 8 Guardsmen responsible, only 7 of them were murdered. The 8th, fearing for his life, disappeared and was never seen again. On March 29, 1924, at the age of 98, Jenny Brooks Johnson asked to wash her hands one last time. Surrounded by her friends, family, and her pastor, she washed her hands in the skull of the man that killed her husband and child. She smiled as her hands lay drying on her stomach, closed her eyes, and died. Some believe that her spirit haunts the Bankhead National Forest. Her vengeance lives on, and is often seen as an eerie green light glowing throughout the woods, forever in search of the 8th gunman that was never found. Mary Daniel Bridge, Highland Home, Alabama. If you visit the Daniel Family Cemetery, located off a small dirt road in Crenshaw County, you will find one gravestone amongst the others that is incomplete. The gravestone belongs to Mary Daniel. Mary Daniel was born December 7, 1846, but the date of her death is unclear and was never recorded. There is little known of mysterious Mary Daniel. Some say she was a practitioner of witchcraft and was infamous for walking a dark path with the devil. Whether the accounts are true or not, it certainly lends a mysterious curiosity to the urban legend surrounding her tragic death. Mary Daniel fell in love and had a baby. It was raining late one night when Mary and her baby were crossing the small bridge in a horse-drawn carriage over what is now known as Little Nostalgia Creek. Lightning struck near the carriage and frightened the horses. The carriage tipped and both Mary and her baby plunged into the water below. She desperately tried to find her baby but could not. Horrified, she walked the horses back to their home to tell her husband of the tragedy that befell them. Their baby was missing and had probably drowned in the creek. He was enraged and deeply saddened by the loss, blaming Mary for the death of their newborn child. He began drinking heavily and was said to be in a constant state of misery and anger. One night shortly after, he snapped and became violent towards Mary. He assaulted her and rendered her unconscious. When Mary came to, she was being dragged through the woods toward the bridge. She struggled to free herself, but he was too strong. He roped her by the neck and threw her from the bridge, then leapt to his death in the waters his infant child had drowned in. The body of the baby was found shortly after, on the edge of the creek bed. Official cause of death? Drowning. The baby was buried in the Daniel family cemetery less than 500 feet from the bridge. Almost immediately after her death, witnesses claimed to see a distraught Mary on the bridge desperately searching for her missing baby. Strange glowing mists and orbs of light are reported at the bridge and the Daniel family cemetery. Many believe this is the ghost of Mary Daniel. Bill Sketoe's Hole, Dale County, Alabama. On December 3, 1864, 46-year-old Bill Sketoe was crossing the bridge over the Chattahoochee River, where a band of Confederates were waiting in pursuit. The Confederates were losing the war and bloodthirsty, murdering anyone they found to be aiding the Union soldiers. The Confederate unit, led by Joseph Breer, trapped the minister on the bridge and began beating him. They tied him up and locked him inside a horse-drawn buggy, while they prepared a noose around the limb of an old post oak tree. Around this time, a friend of Sketoe's was passing through and tried to help him, but to no avail. The man ran to the nearest town of Newton to get help. Breer and his men became anxious. With rope around the minister's neck, they asked if he had any last words. Standing atop the horse-drawn buggy, the minister began praying. Not for his own life, but for the life of the men who were trying to kill him. This was infuriating to Breer, who lashed out at the horse, causing Sketoe to lose his footing and fall from the buggy. But the Confederates didn't take into account the minister's large girth and tall build. The limb holding Sketoe bent downward, allowing his feet to touch the ground. Working in haste for fear of the minister's rescue, Breer and his men began digging a hole underneath Sketoe, causing the minister to slowly suffocate. He died shortly before his rescuers arrived. Shortly after his death, all members of the lynching party died under mysterious circumstances, including Joseph Breer, who was struck in the head by a fallen limb from a post oak tree that had been struck by lightning, the same type of tree that Sketoe was hanged from. For 126 years the hole could be observed. Legend says that the hole was filled many times but maintained a dimension of 30 inches wide by 8 inches deep. The spot became a popular tourist stop to see if the hole could be filled. One witness even claimed that he filled the hole and pitched a tent over the top of the freshly covered ground. When he awoke the next morning, his tent had sunken in. City officials tried filling the hole, but no matter how they tried, the hole always reappeared. Witnesses described the hole as always appearing freshly dug, with obvious impressions of 2 feet scraping the ground. In 1990, after heavy flooding in the area, the city imported tons of rock to fill the cavity and strengthen the riverbed. Although covered by rock, some claim you can still see the impression of the hole in the ground. A monument to his death was dedicated at the site. Dead Children's Playground, Huntsville, Alabama. Maple Hill Cemetery was founded in 1822, making it the oldest and largest cemetery in Alabama. Tucked away in a dark corner of the cemetery and surrounded on 3 sides by limestone walls from an old quarry lies Strauss Park, known to the locals as the Dead Children's Playground. Surrounded in a canopy of trees, this dark, shadowy playground is eerie during the day, but come nightfall, it takes an even more frightening appearance, and the history of the quarry and the land the park is built on is even more disturbing. In the 1960s, children began disappearing in Huntsville. When a child's skull was found in one of the limestone quarries, an investigation began. Several bodies were found within the abandoned quarries. Some were skeletal remains, but a few others were freshly murdered, their flesh still intact. Evidence showed that the children died very slowly of starvation and malnutrition. Some of the bodies showed severe wounds that had healed and marks of restraint. The killer was never found. Their bodies were buried in the adjacent Maple Hills Cemetery. 20 years later, in 1985, the playground was erected in honor of the children who were murdered there. It is said that the spirits of the children murdered haunt the playground. The swings sway back and forth on their own. Strange lights are seen floating around the park, and children's screams are heard coming from the nearby quarries. Some have seen apparitions of children playing, accompanied by giggling. The sand is said to be constantly stirred up into the air by the kicking and running feet of unseen children. Jack Cole Road, Blount County, Alabama. Deep within the beautiful woodlands of Hayden, Alabama, lies the legendary Jack Cole Road. This 3/4-mile unpaved road located off of Highway 7 has been the epicenter for tales of mystery and murder. Through the years, only a handful of homes have been documented to exist on the road. Yet through its history, 69 people have died on this road due to mysterious circumstances. Blount County became a major place of interest for the upper class and wealthy due to the opening of the Blount County Springs Hotel and Resort that opened in 1843. People gathered from far distances to bathe in the relaxing and curative springs that were rich with minerals and medicinal properties. Before the resort's opening, it was said that even Davy Crockett spent time in the springs to recuperate from a severe fever, and it was well known throughout the Native American tribes as a place of healing. The site of the hotel and springs is located in the woods near Jack Cole Road. The cholera outbreak of 1873 took the lives of many people. It was said that the disease spread rapidly after contaminating the water supply. The Blount Springs Hotel and Resort was used to help people try and recover. But by the end of its deadly course, cholera took the lives of 60 people at the springs. Between 1873 and 1890, people began reporting unexplainable and terrifying sightings in the woods and on the road. So many people were reporting seeing and hearing unsettling things in the woods that news articles were written about the odd occurrences. It wasn't until 1890, when a large, Bigfoot-like creature was witnessed by many people, that investigations into these mysteries began. Local hunters were sent out into the woods to try and discover the whereabouts of the creature. When the men returned, they told tales of phantom lights that seemed alive, following them through the woods, eerie screaming unlike anything they had ever heard, and shadowy figures that floated and moved in ways inhumanly possible. That's when the legends began. By 1900, the hotel and resort had lost its popularity, and in 1915, a tragic fire burned the hotel and resort to the ground. Shortly after, the next victim of Jack Cole Road would be found. Sometime between 1915 and 1940, a man who lived at the end of Jack Cole Road began telling people of strange things he was experiencing in his home and surrounding woods. He was afraid to go home and spent much of his time surrounded by others. In this time, he told many people horrifying tales of being stalked by a dark, shadowy beast in the woods. He said he felt as if the thing had cursed him and soon began experiencing strange things inside his home. He said that the thing was always watching him from the woods and that it remained in view no matter which window he peered out from. His fireplace would start burning on its own, and phantom faces would be seen floating out from the flames. People in town who heard these stories began thinking the man had gone insane. Shortly after, the man was found dead in his home, suicide by hanging. It was during this time that the people in town began believing him because they were also seeing the large creature from the windows of the dead man's house and hearing strange noises coming from within. By 1940, so many people had seen the creature that it sparked one of the largest search operations in Blount County history. What they discovered only led to more questions. Tucked away deep in the woods beyond the road, they found an old log cabin. Within it was the mummified remains of an old woman. The community was horrified and confused. Although the community was small, they never knew of her or the cabin's existence. How long has she been dead? What killed her? And even more baffling, how is she mummified? Theories began of the old woman being a witch. Stories were told about how she had cursed the surrounding woods, which explained all the mysterious happenings there. They buried her body in hopes that the curse would be lifted, but that only increased the sightings and strange occurrences. In the late 1960s, Mr. Hawes, a well-respected and loved fruit farmer, was found murdered outside his home on Jack Cole Road. He was found axed to death. The brutality of the murder left the community horrified and lended credibility to the terrifying accounts on the already infamous road. The man charged with the crime maintained his innocence until his death. He was sentenced to life in prison for a crime he did not commit, and died knowing he was falsely accused and would never again be free. On April 8, 2003, the body of James Spider Martin was found dead in his home on Jack Cole Road. Spider Martin was a famous photographer, documenting some of the most influential moments of the civil rights movement. His photos paved the way for the future of civil rights, and was even credited by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to have been a major influence in the passing of the Voting Rights Act, saying, quote, "Spider, we could have marched, we could have protested forever, but if it weren't for guys like you, it would have been for nothing. The whole world saw your pictures. That's why the Voting Rights Act was passed." Unquote. Spider maintained and struggled through death threats and harassment from government and police officials, never wavering at the sign of danger. In 1992, Andrew Young said of Martin, quote, "In Spider Martin's hands, a camera is a weapon of discovery, revealing truths long concealed by prejudice and mythology." Unquote. Official reports say that he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Shortly before his death, he had experienced something in the woods that had frightened him, something unexplainable. Whatever it was followed him into his home, and some believe it scared him to death. He had died in a similar way and under similar circumstances as the first suicide on Jack Cole Road that occurred in the early 1900s. James Spider Martin gave a voice to those oppressed. That voice was loud and instrumental in the change that united us all. What could have possibly scared someone who had captured and endured so many horrors? Since Martin's death, Jack Cole Road has taken 3 more victims. Between 2012 and 2014, 2 people were found murdered. Their bodies were left under the shadowy canopy of Jack Cole Road. On February 5, 2015, Felicia Ann Lisa Weaver went missing. Weaver's health left her homebound and immobile. She was living with her ex-husband and 2 of her sons because she needed help and could no longer take care of herself. Their home was at the end of Jack Cole Road. At 2:37 p.m., everyone in the house had left except Weaver. Her son wrote her, letting her know that he was on his way home. That was the last time anyone had seen or heard from her. When the son arrived, the home was engulfed in flames. The investigation found no conclusive evidence of how the fire had started. Weaver's car was still on the premises and had not moved. The remains of the family's 3 dogs were found burned inside the house, but the body of Lisa Weaver was never found.